So, good afternoon. My name is Novella Ford. I'm the Associate Director of Public Programs and Exhibitions here at the Schomburg Center. For those of you who may not know, the Schomburg Center is part of the New York Public Library, and we're dedicated to the collection, preservation, and interpretation of global Black experiences. Because we are part of the library, it's part of the reason why we do this literary festival. It was started 6 years ago. But the Schomburg Center next year will be celebrating its centennial. Can you imagine? Yeah, thank you. So if you're enjoying this festival, we hope that you will return next year because we plan on doing it even bigger and better, still on 135th Street, as well as here at the Schomburg Center. But we're going to get into this conversation with Jonell Joshua, who is the artist for the artwork that you see as part of the festival. So let's give her a round of applause because how beautiful is this? Thank you. Jonell is an author, illustrator based in Brooklyn, New York. Her passion for familial roots, her passion for drawing. See, this is what happens when you're not wearing your glasses. Let me not try to do this without. There we go. Her passion for drawing has deep roots and stemming from a young age, inspired by her mother's artwork, familial roots in New York, and adolescence spent in the heart of South Jersey, Savannah, Georgia. Her professional work has explored a range of topics in editorial, illustration, and publication, including illustrating for Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls, 100 Real-Life Tales of Black Girl Magic, the Queens of Resistance series, and work featured in the film Selah and the Spades. She has worked with clients including the New York Times, the Washington Post, New York Magazine, NPR, and now the New York Public Library at the Schomburg Center. Her work has been recognized by the Society of Illustrators and American Illustration International Motion Art Awards, and her debut illustrated memoir, How Do I Draw These Memories, released everywhere in April of 2024. And we are going to get into this particular book and also first get started in a conversation just about how did you come to think of this particular work? I reached out to you, wanted to have something commissioned for the literary festival. We always include artists as part of the literary festival and thinking about the Harlem Renaissance and how artists and literary figures were constantly in conversation, right? And so you see the covers of books of Langston Hughes and many others. Aaron Douglas is doing that work. And so we want it to be associated with illustrators and visual artists of today. So when people look back on this festival 100 years from now, they'll go, oh, Jonell Joshua was also working with the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. So I'm just curious about all of the things that you were thinking about when you thought about this.
Yes, this was so fun to work on, first and foremost. So when you reached out to me and you shared a little bit about the festival and the idea of what would be involved, the immediate thing that I thought about was, of course, like Black joy. And of course, with literature and bringing that together, especially on June 15th, which is a Saturday, I couldn't help but think about all of the block parties that I see going on when I'm like walking down the streets in New York and Harlem. So I wanted to try to convey that as much as possible into a piece and draw like actual characters and people celebrating. So when I was figuring out like how I wanted it to be, I thought of like very distinct characters that you see when you're walking down the street in New York, particularly like when I'm walking, I live in Brooklyn, so when I'm walking down the streets in Brooklyn and it's summertime, you know, there's always like this beautiful Black woman that's a little Afrocentric and she's wearing like a beautiful like skirt and dress and afro is natural. So that's where that character comes in, who's reading the book with the red skirt. And then, of course, you have like the girls in the back with the Black woman wearing the purple outfit.
Like
I was actually,
outfit?
yes,
Yeah.
I was actually thinking of like a nurse. And she has like her hair freshly curled and she has like the short pixie cut. So like, of course, when I'm walking down the street and I'm seeing like just Black people celebrating during the summer, I like have these characters in mind. So that's really what I was extracting from when I wanted to pour into this piece. And of course, then you have on the side like the grill. You have like the dad just chilling with like um, the the lawn chair, and then you also have, of course, like the guy in the back. He might be
Enjoying the
Dominican, he's
music,
Hispanic,
right?
and then he's just like dancing and bouncing around. So there's always like so many beautiful characters in the city, and it was just so fun to like think of and pull out and make all of these characters come to life within my own piece for this celebration today. And then, of course, thinking about other aspects by thinking about having a festival, and specifically a literary festival and books, that's where you actually can see this, like I call it the book rainbow. So at the very top, the books kind of like pour out into the shape of a rainbow and then the sun at the center. So I really wanted to highlight books within this in as many ways as possible. So not only people reading books in different ways with, of course, like the girl holding the book while she's like double dutching and the woman like, you know, clearly she's like enjoying the book that she's reading while she's walking down the street. You have like the dad that's reading the book while he's just like waiting for the hamburgers to get grilled. And then this rainbow really to just like highlight what this is today and to celebrate literature and Black literature. So it was really fun to create this piece for this festival.
Well, I'll just mention, I don't know if you know that Maya Angelou quote, but she says, when it looked like the sun would not shine anymore, God put a rainbow in the clouds. Look at that. Look at that. That's a library. A library is a rainbow in the clouds.
I did not know that, but
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to save that.
Yes. I will share it
That
with
is
you.
so
It's
cool.
it's part of a collection of quotes that I often use as part of the literary festival just to inspire people. Which leads me really to sort of this next question or idea that I would love for you to sort of tease out a bit, which is how you're thinking about your visual arts as a form of storytelling.
That's a good question. When it comes to making art pieces and when it comes to storytelling, I think the storytelling is always at the forefront. With my background, when I think I'll actually rewind to college when I was thinking about what I wanted to do for my thesis work. I went to Pratt Institute, which is a predominantly white institution. And at the time when I was thinking about the work that I wanted to create, I was really I was a little torn, but I was also really drawn to identity. And I was torn because I couldn't help but think about like being perceived by white people and white audiences. But I couldn't help but want to draw from my identity and my experience when it came to creating art. So rather than conforming to the people around me, I decided to do the opposite and just like lean in to my culture and my experience and really have that do all of the talking. So my thesis work was nostalgic moments within Black culture. And then from there, post-grad, I started working with different clients, and storytelling came from a lot of different areas. Because for me as an artist, I also don't want to be scapegoated when it comes to creating. I want to have art that speaks for Black culture and highlight that and celebrate that. But at the same time, I also want to explore so many other like areas and subject matters. And when I'm working in editorial illustration specifically, you know, I'll have an art director that reaches out to me with a really interesting story about, you know, plucking eyebrows. And, you know, that could be like very quirky and fun. And then from that, I don't have to think so hard about it. I can just focus on like, oh, this is an interesting article about like, you know, like what you can do with like your eyebrows, and then create a piece from there. So there's so many ways to draw inspiration from life and articles and different stories. And even when it comes to doing book work, when I started collaborating with different authors, One was the Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls, 100 Real Life Tales of Black Girl Magic. And the other one was the Queens of the Resistance series. Both of those were focused on like the Queens of the Resistance series was with Black authors, and the 100 Real Life Tales of Black Girl Magic, of course, that's highlighting Black women like across the African diaspora. And that one was very special because, you know, I'm collaborating with these people in a way that's showing like and celebrating and also teaching about like history and inventors and all of these incredible Black women that they might not know about. And that one in particular, the two characters that I drew for that book, I can't remember their names off the top of my head, but I actually learned while I was making that piece. And I learned about, one of them was Sandra Aguabor. She was actually the first woman Nigerian mechanic. And the other one, I can't remember her name, but if it pops up, I will definitely say her name. She was actually like a pioneer when it came to office supplies. So creating like staples and like scissors that work really well. So there's all these people and inventors and Black women that we don't hear about on a daily basis, that when a prompt is given to me, you know, I really am thinking in my head, like, okay, is this something that I can learn from? And how is this also helping others when I'm making it? So on one side, I'm always very much pro-Black when it comes to the work that I'm creating, but I also want to have fun at the same time. So it really is a matter of just deciphering as best as possible, like, what is the work that I want to put out there and share, and how can I bring joy with my work that I'm creating as well.
Yeah. I mean, what you described is something that a lot of Black artists talk about, which is the expansiveness of the stories that they want to tell, right? So all their art doesn't have to be biographical. Some of it is, and it's very important, but some of it is not, and that's okay.
Yes.
And it's still done by a Black artist, and it's still Black art. However, it just doesn't have to be biographical in a way that sometimes folks want to make it like anthropology in some way, shape, or form. So I love that consideration that you're making, which brings us, to this particular book. And I'm going to make a bit of a comparison of this particular memoir to Toni Morrison's Black Book. Now, just hang out with me for a second. So Toni Morrison produced this book in the late 70s, and it's really kind of like an archive in book form, right? And it's appear in various periods of time, and it includes clippings, newspaper clippings, it includes memorabilia, but it was like this book that had never been created before. It was kind of like being able to come to the Schomburg, but in a book form, right? Where people could learn and they could both be angry and they could be celebrated, right? At both all the good things that have been done, but things that have also been really incredibly hard. And in part of the intro, she talks about how someone who was in prison had written to her and asked her for 2 more books because he had been given 1 book. In 1 book, he needed a book to give to a friend, and he needed a book to throw at the wall over and over again. And he wanted the one that he already had to keep in his arms to hold close to his heart. And that to me sounds like family, right? The other thing that she wrote this sort of from the point of view of the Black Book. And I'm not reading it in full, but just to give you a sense. So she writes, I am the Black Book. Between my top and my bottom, my right and my left, I hold what I have seen, what I have done, what I have thought. I am the ways I have failed. I am all the ways I survived. I am all the things I have seen. I am all the things I've ever loved. I am not complete. There is much more. And so when looking at this particular illustrated memoir and sort of seeing how you've put it together, I feel like it's all of those things, right? There are these snatches of your life, and you've illustrated them and you've written it, and it's like your own archive. And it just made me think, what would it be like to think of an archive of my own life that didn't necessarily need it to be collaged, right? But there's some of that happening in here. So could you just talk about your life as an archive and what you were doing in putting this particular book together.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So this book, I call it a few things. One, it is absolutely an archive. It has family photos that my grandparents have. And I also inherited a box of family photographs from my maternal grandparents. So it's an archive. I call it a scrapbook because the way I considered creating this, I really wanted it to feel almost like a photo album.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're flipping through the pages, you'll see text, but you'll also see photographs. And the way that I collage them is from what I saw when I was like looking through photographs with my grandparents growing up. So I really wanted to honor like a scrapbook feel because that's really what I saw when I was like learning about my family history with my family and my grandparents. And they would tell us all about their experience growing up and all the trips that they would go on. But not only that, I call this book a collaboration. So with this book, it's not just from my perspective, it's also from the perspective of my grandparents, of my mother, and of my older brothers as well. So when you're reading through the book, you're not only reading from my perspective, the next chapter you read might be from my mom's point of view, or it might be interviews with my grandparents and them sharing their history of what it was like for them growing up. So for me, when I thought of creating a memoir, I couldn't help but think about who I was raised by and also the joy that I had with my family, despite any sort of obstacle or circumstance we might have gone through. We were always a unit. So for me, it was just really important to honor my family in the best way I could. So from there, I just poured my heart and soul into creating this. And I'm so happy that my family is happy with it and I'm proud of it. And when I look at it, I really do see that scrapbook. Even in the front cover, like having me and my brothers on the cover, and then, you know, really thinking of like doing cutouts. So like cutting construction paper and like using a photograph that my mom took of us at the park at Lake Mayer, and not cutting the original, of course. Got to keep the original intact. But, you know, even with that in mind, I learned a lot about like preserving photographs as well, and making sure that everything stayed intact. So a lot of scanning was done during this process as well. And through that, I also realized like, wow, it's really important to do this, to not only have these photos, but also preserve them and archive them, because, you know, you never know what can happen in life. But for me and my family, we actually thought that we lost a lot of these photographs because we bounced around growing up. So we were moving from one place to another. And then years later, it was a family member that actually found the photographs and then gave them to me. And then from that box, that was kind of like the starting point to crafting this without me even realizing what I was doing. Having that really was like the first point of inspiration for creating this.
I'm going to want you, I know you have a couple of passages to read from because there are a lot of places covered in this book. And also, it's quite dense. For our first memoir, you were like, I'm going to pour it on here.
424 pages.
But it's also something, it feels like something that an artist would put together. It's very textual, like the cover is very textual. You see all kinds of drawing styles, you know, it kind of has a graphic novel feel at different points. And then you, of course, the scrapbooking at different points. And then there's all the writing inside there. And before you read a bit from here, here's a question that I have for you, because you do talk a lot about Black joy and sort of what it means to like be a unit and find happiness despite the various situations that one may have been in. But I'm curious, like, which memories did you have the hardest to put in there? And or did they not make it into this book in thinking about, I don't know, what other family members might have felt about including those memories in there? And or frankly, the way that, folks say that's not for outside people's knowledge.
Went through those conversations.
Right, but also wanting to remain true to a variety of memories. And of course, you can do whatever you want, but I'm just curious about the hard parts, if there were hard parts that you either kept or you pulled out.
Yeah, so your first question, can you actually repeat that first question for me?
Yeah, so no, it was just simply which memories did you have the hardest time keeping in, and or did you not put those hard memories in the book?
Yeah, I would say the hardest memories. So to give a little bit of context, my book, I explore mental health, particularly with a parent that had bipolar disorder. So growing up, I had a very difficult experience with parental figures. So unfortunately, my father passed away when I was only 6 years old, and my mother struggled with mental illness. So when I was creating this book, the point of me creating this was actually to share with young people, because the age range for this book is ages 12 to 18 plus. So it's for preteen, well, early teens, teens, and adults as well. So it's something for a little bit of everyone. But for me in particular, when I was growing up, I actually read a lot of what I call sad stories growing up. So for me, having other books to read that talked about really difficult things, one in particular was this book called Memories of Summer. And this book was about a young girl and her sister that had schizophrenia. And I read that in 3rd grade. And for me, reading that when I was only in 3rd grade was like, wow, there's books out here that actually talk about these things, and I can really relate to this. So that was where I really came from when approaching this myself, because of my experience growing up and all that I went through and coming over that. I couldn't help but want to share that story first and foremost. And from there, it was one thing to think that. Of course, it was another thing to actually do it, because when I started actually writing, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? So one of the hardest things to talk about was confronting the conversations around mental health, because during the process, the first thing I did was I asked for consent. So I spoke with my brothers, my mom, and my grandparents. So everyone involved in this, I had a conversation with them to talk with them about what I was doing. And from there, that's when one by one, having one-on-one interviews with everyone, having group interviews at times, and really just like diving into conversations. So whenever we were having a conversation, I would say like, okay, I'm doing this interview for the book. If there's something that you don't feel comfortable with, just let me know, and then we can go from there. So at some points, we would have conversations. Some were more difficult than others. And when my mom and when I was having a conversation with her, I realized that some of these conversations were questions I had never asked before. And it made me realize there were so many layers to my mother that I had no idea. And I really discovered a lot during the process. And another thing that I call this book is, I call it a healing journey. So for me, writing this book, towards the end, you really see healing with my family. And you really see us having conversations. And that's where these interviews come in. So I also hope that when people read my book, they'll see me having conversations with my family and see like, oh, wait, this is a Black family opening up about their experience. And they're talking about really difficult things that maybe they haven't considered opening up about with their family members. And sometimes it really is as simple as having a conversation. And sometimes it's as simple as saying like, this is how I felt when I was younger. I never told you about this, but I want to start here and then go from there and then see where that takes you. For me, it really started there, and I'm so happy that by the end of this, I've been able to build a stronger relationship with my family. We're able to have more open conversations about what's going on. Even my brothers, when it comes to conversations around mental health, I feel like we're more open with each other to talking about this.
Yeah.
So even though it was very difficult, 100% honest, this was like a really challenging book to write at times. And I found myself like crying while I was writing and really just pouring out my heart and soul into this. But even generationally, with grandparents, that was also a difficult thing to navigate, because I didn't want to ignore all of the incredible support that I had from my grandparents. So with my parents, I mentioned that one passed away and one struggled with mental illness. One thing that I really talk about throughout the book is having a village. And for me, that village also came from my grandparents. So I shuttled back and forth between Savannah and New Jersey growing up, where my maternal grandparents were in New Jersey and my paternal grandparents were in Savannah, Georgia. And we bounced back and forth between both places. So during the summers, we were at Camp Joshua. And during the school year, we were in New Jersey with our grandparents and our mom. And that was our way of also getting additional support. And this was also my way of honoring all that they did for us and honoring their history and just showing to everyone else, you know, you don't have to go through whatever you're going through alone. And I grew up always hearing like, it takes a village. And it's so true. It really takes a village. And I think we all really need to like lean into community and support. And whether that's family or not, you know, the other people that come in mind when I was writing this were teachers, having a mentor. There were all these other people around me that helped lift me up when I was young. And this was just my way of honoring all of those people while we were also going through everything.
Yeah. No, I thank you for sharing that. And also offering this invitation for other families, right? And other people who may have these kind of conversations that are difficult, but you as a young person in the family might be able to start them, right? Because sometimes you're also treated as you're the young person in the family. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, so being brave enough, but also trusting your family members enough to be willing to at least hear you out, right?
And another thing I did when it came to even having the conversations, it really was a lot of deciphering of, is this necessary for the book, or is this something that I want to keep to my heart and to myself? So there was a lot of that as well. And my grandmother on my father's side, she uses the word discernment. And I'm a firm believer in that as well, like having discernment with, you know, what is meant for everybody and what is really meant for me and my heart. So I really did go through this process of really sitting with some of the more difficult conversations and some of the really intimate, joyous conversations. I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep this one of what you're telling me for me. So that was definitely something that I was also navigating through the process.
Oh, I love hearing that there's also joyful parts that didn't make it because they were personal and intimate to you. Let's go ahead and hear some reading.
Oh my gosh, yes. So I'm going to start off with my introduction. So on the cover, I have a parrot. So the parrot is very symbolic of the first time I actually saw my mom's drawing portfolio. So my mother is actually an artist, and she was my first point of inspiration for becoming an artist myself. This book is a collection of memories, some more detailed than others, some my own, and some the memories of others close to me, my family, all compiled together to share our story, the story of our love, and the story of our journey. So the first chapter is called Lake Mayer, and this is in Savannah, Georgia, for reference. I hopped out of Old Betsy with my plastic bucket and shovel. Jeremy and Jordan ran ahead as Mom locked the car door. The parking lot led to the trail that ran along the perimeter of the lake for jogging and long walks. This was where all the Canadian geese flocked to terrorize us. Sometimes, Mom would bring a few slices of stale bread so we could throw it at them. Further toward the center was the recreation area. Over there was the rink that was used for roller hockey that I'd gaze over at from a distance. I'd heard they would convert it to an ice rink in the winter. The playground was always hot to the touch, so my usual course of action was to bring my shovel and bucket to dig in the sandy dirt near the lake, chasing after the dragonflies, and walking on the dock with my brothers where the fishermen stood. Our family on the Hargrove Joshua side would get together for family reunions in the banquet hall here, and I'd devour a plate full of grilled hamburgers, grandma's potato salad, and sip on cold, wet cans of crushed orange soda. Electric Boogie was the anthem, always. I'd overhear my grandparents and the other older folks' excitement when the song started, and them shouting, "All right now," as they busted a move in the middle of the banquet hall, all in unison. I've got to groove, groove, groove. And right after that intro, I actually have a photo of me at Lake Mayer with all of the geese. And the first chapter is titled My Earliest Memories. So I dive into a lot of, it's very experimental. So throughout you'll see like comic chapters and you'll see illustrated spreads like these. So it's a very abstract approach to what my memory was of that time. So the next chapter I'm going to read is called Clip-Ons. And this is honoring my grandmother, Connie. Her full name was Constance Johnson. And when I was younger, I used to look at her jewelry in her jewelry box. I walked up the creaking stairs, and creaking stairs and lean into the room for a moment to look around. I creep over, stepping over Grandpa's pants. I look up at the painting of the black naked lady on the wall, again before tiptoeing over to Grandma and Grandpa's dresser. She showed me this once. I pick away at the assortment of jewelry, and most notably, Grandma's pearl necklace. I hold the necklace for a moment, noticing the gold clasp at the end and the milky white orb spilling down. I place it back in the box, immediately moving on to more of Grandma's jewelry, pinching curiously at the clip-on earrings and pulling apart the clasp from the base and cupping it closed again, and flicking it back open again, over and over again, looking at the small white jelly piece that cushioned the impact. I look over at more of Grandma's clip-ons and see the one I really want to try on. The cushion piece on this one is missing, though. I pick it up, opening the clasp, and bring it closer to my ear. I try my best to gently close the clasp around my earlobe, but the strength of the clasp still squeezes my lobe tight. I let my finger go and feel the weight of the earlobe pull down. It feels heavy. I look at my reflection in the mirror, tilting my head to the side to get a good look at my now adorned earlobe. It looks pretty. So that's clip-ons. And I'm also wearing a jewelry piece that my friend Ada Chen made for me. So I had a collaboration with her, and I wanted to create what I call an heirloom piece to honor my grandmother, Connie.
Thank you for reading that. No, you're going to read one more piece, but I was just going to say, one, I felt like I was in my grandmother's jewelry box as well, and I was complimenting you on that piece. And so hearing that read, I was like, gosh, that feels so inspired by her grandmother's jewelry, or like a grandmother's jewelry box. So
yeah,
that was really cool to hear.
Yeah, these are the little ways of diving deep into my vault of memories. And those little moments that are really precious and special. So not just conversations, but what was around me, what was I observing, and visually, what did it feel like to be there? So even that was just really special to think back on. And this chapter specifically, I wrote in present tense because I really wanted to feel like that little 7-year-old girl again, walking into my grandparents' bedroom and seeing the painting that's kind of inappropriate on the wall. I'm like, what's going on? And then just being so focused on the jewelry. So this was a really special chapter for me.
Yeah. After this last reading, we're going to open it up to questions. So if you have any, please get them ready.
So the next chapter, this is also honoring my grandmother, but this is my paternal grandmother, Grandma Alice, and she's in Savannah, Georgia. So this chapter is called "The Devil is Slapping His Wife." So it's also, okay, I don't think this one is in present tense. This is past tense. I walked into the den, and I heard the quick applause of the rain. I walked over to the patio door, sliding open the blinds to let in the bright sunshine peering through. I looked up at the parted clouds. The sky was still blue, even as the downpour ferociously continued. Grandma stood beside me as we watched. The devil is slapping his wife. Huh? The devil is slapping his wife. That's what they say when there's sunshine and it's raining at the same time. Why do they say that? Grandma shrugged her shoulders. I don't know. I look out the window at the heavy sun shower. The rain smelled nice. So that was a conversation that I had with my grandmother in Savannah. If any of you have ever been before, it's very subtropic climate. So there will just be like a random like sun shower. But this one was really special because I feel like when it comes to conversations that we have with our grandparents, they'll have these like quirky things that they say, and then it just gets passed down. So now I have like this very specific statement that I just live with forever. So anytime I see it sun showering, I always associate it with my grandmother saying the devil is slapping his wife. Right. I don't know where it comes from. She doesn't know where it comes from, but it comes from somewhere.
Thank you so much for that reading. Please give her a round of applause. We have time for 2 questions. I'll take one now. Any question? Okay, we're going to go. Yep.
Here you go.
Love it.
Hi, I'm Jamila. Thank you for coming and reading to us. It was amazing. One note, I think, listening to you read, your writing is very, very, like it gives me a very vivid picture of what you're seeing, and it makes me physically go there. So I want to know your process of like, is it that you make the pieces and then kind of find the right words to tell the story? Or do you tell the story and then kind of find the right visual elements to complement it?
That's a great question. It was actually a little bit of both. So this was truly like an experiment. And I would call it more of like crafting a book rather than writing a book. Some chapters, I immediately knew that I wanted them to be, when I was creating this, I guess I'll rewind back to conversations that I had with my editor about creating a graphic novel, because when they first approached me about writing something, they knew me as an illustrator. And they immediately thought, oh, wow, your style could really work for a graphic novel. But when I actually created my pitch to create a graphic novel, I didn't want it to just be all visual. And I felt like some conversations were better served as just prose, so just text. And other chapters, like more lighthearted, funny ones, where I'll kind of open up to one that I'll highlight. I have some that are called open mic nights, and some that are like flashback spreads, so my brothers and their memories and making that abstract. And then I also have some traditional comic panels as well. So let's see if I can find one really quick. But with all of those, even the comic chapters, like the way I approached it was, this is like a really humorous like memory that I have with me and my brothers. And the reason for that was because I drew inspiration from reading manga when I was little. So we had like a big like blue bin of Shonen Jump magazines. And I realized while writing this that like when I was reading Shonen Jump, it was always like these really funny comic stories but they were also like really heavy, and there was always like a main character that was 14 years old. So it was very relatable as a kid to have mature content, but you're a kid and you're relating to the story that's going on. So I wanted to approach the comic chapters like that, where it's humorous and really lighthearted, and you're just kind of like reading through it. But then the prose chapters are a little more serious and in-depth. And with that, I really wanted to like bring the reader into what it was like to be there. So really being like visually descriptive with my writing without actually drawing something or showing a photograph. And then when it came to what I call flashback spreads, so that'll be like the first, let's see, like a page like this. So I call them flashback spreads because they're really like my memory in this abstract form. And, you know, I don't know what it was truly like to be there unless I was actually presently there at this point, because memory, the older you get, becomes more abstract. So that's how I wanted to approach it, with kind of like a collage effect, kind of adding photos and also adding these elements that I remember. So like, you know, my mom cutting watermelon seeds and then me like planting it into the soil in the front yard. Those little moments that I remember, I can't visually like show like an exact image of what it was like to be there, but maybe I can pull these like specific moments and then create some sort of collage, and then that also be part of like the scrapbook effect.
So I actually am going to stop it right there. We are now out of time. However, please give her another round of applause. Thank you so much, Jonell. Her book signing will be in the Langston Hughes lobby, so the one that you came across, well, you probably didn't come across it, you came down the stairs, but it's right in the center here. Books are available in the Schomburg shop, and you will be signing them. Also, if you're not, well, I'm not going to put that out there, but you know, I've seen other people ask for an autograph from previous artists. So that's something you might want to think about. And our closing program, it will be happening in the Langston Hughes Auditorium. This year celebrates James Baldwin's centennial birthday. There are 2 exhibitions that will be here at the New York Public Library. One of them opened as part of Treasures on Wednesday, June 13th. And so Rich Blint, who is one of the foremost scholars on James Baldwin, will be part of our closing program, and he'll be in conversation with Joy Bivens, the director, to just talk about James Baldwin now, why are we still reading James Baldwin, why it's important, and to, again, carry on this theme around reading boldly, right, in a times like this. But thank you so much for bringing us joy, for thinking about hard conversations, but also being really thoughtful about how the visual and the prosaic work together.
Thank you.
Thank you
also,
all.
I know there was a couple of people that had questions, so feel free to just stop by and ask me a question as I'm walking around too.
Yep, at the book signing.
Yes.
Yep, upstairs.